Now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the backside of the desert and came to the mountain of God, even to Horeb. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. And Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burnt. And when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called unto him out of the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. Verse number 1, he says, and he led the flock to the backside of the desert. This morning, I want to tag this text for the time that is ours, brothers and sisters, by the subject, traveling the back road. Traveling the back road. And furthermore, what I want to highlight for you this morning on the path to your purpose is that you might not get to where God intends for you to be until you become fond of the back road. It's been a long week. It's been a lot happening this week. I haven't taken a lot of time to really dig as deep as I want to in this text, but there is an ideal here. An ideal that becomes evidently clear to me, and that is sometimes it is necessary to go a different way. Sometimes it's necessary to go a way where you don't have to be bombarded by a bunch of folk and a bunch of cars and a bunch of traffic, but sometimes you need to go a way that not everybody else is on. Here, what we find in the life of Moses is that Moses is in a very unique place in time in his life where he has moved from failure. He is moving into new calling, but now he's in a place where there's not a lot of folk, there's not a lot of lights, there's not a lot of attention, and it's in this place that we find that Moses receives a call from God. And I don't know if you see it yet, but that's really the point and ideal of the text. That Moses receives the call from God when he's in a place where he's not in the palace of Egypt. He's not before all the people. He doesn't have a bunch of power and a bunch of folk under his command. No, all he has is his father-in-law's sheep. And this is what I found out is that when you have fallen from calling, you might find yourself doing tasks that seem insignificant. But what matters here is not that you view those tasks as insignificant, but that you give it all that you have, especially because it is believed that Moses is at a point where he has nothing else. Yeah. And if anybody learns how to do what is necessary, it is those who have come to a place where they have nothing else. Yeah. Sometimes there are certain jobs that we look at that are too small and unnecessary because we got too much stuff and we got too much dignity and we think of ourselves too highly to do certain things. But brothers and sisters, might I remind you that you might not run or look at any task that God gives you as a small task, especially when the Lord has a hand in it. I hear you. It's in this church that I will remind you that when we are on the back roads, that we don't come to despise the task that God gives our hands to do. See, the interesting thing here, in contrast for you to see, is that there is a difference between being on the back road and the front road. There is a difference from being in the back stage and on the front stage. And here, what I simply believe that this text is tailored to teach us is that how you handle your back road experiences will determine what happens when God puts you on center stage. When you learn to look at no job as too small on the back road where nobody can see you and nobody's going to give you any rewards, nobody's going to pat you on the back. At the end of the day, when you learn to do it before God, I believe that what happens in those experiences, that God can do something when he sees your faithfulness on the back road. Sees your faithfulness when nobody is watching you, and nobody's going to applaud you, nobody's going to celebrate, and nobody would even know the things that you do when nobody else is watching. There is no small task on the back road. There are some unorthodox relationships that are essential to your growth. That here, the text, I believe, it wants to point out for us and highlight that there are some relationships that we like to discredit because they are unorthodox, because they are not what we are traditionally used to. That there are some people that you meet not on the front roads of life, but on the back roads of life. When you don't have many friends on these back roads, there are some folk that you run into that have some unorthodox practices that are not traditionally aligned with what you might have grown up with. That there are some people who don't believe like you believe. They weren't reared like you were reared, but somehow when you came in contact with them, they were the relationship that you needed, and it was through that relationship that you come to learn and discover your own calling before God. Sometimes when you find yourself running from failure, God will lead you to people in your life that are unorthodox, that didn't come up the way you did, but in fact they are friends of the Lord. And these relationships become important because somehow they pick you up and they get you at a place when you are down, when you are despondent, when you need some encouragement. And it is these relationships that God sends you at the right time of your life when you're traveling the back roads that will help you to find your way. Is that here God teaches us that most of the time in your life, the reason why we need to pay attention to the back roads is because God is usually discovered on the roads that are less traveled. That God usually is discovered on the roads that not many folk are taking. That's what happens here in the text, that it is while he's on this back road that he comes to have a experience with the supernatural. That is on this back road of his life that he comes to have an experience and an encounter with God that will prove to be the very pivotal moment in the life of Moses in his ministry. That it is these unusual routes in life that the Lord will take you on. And the reason why God will allow you to travel these unusual roads or routes is because God might have something in mind for you, an experience that awaits you down the way. But you have to ask yourself the question, why then, Lord, is it necessary that I travel on these roads that are less traveled? Well, I believe here that it is this unusual path that God leads Moses to that becomes necessary in his life. Why? Because what I've also learned is that sometimes if you're going to have a relationship with God, you got to have a relationship with God that is unique to your own experience of God. Sometimes if you're going to have a relationship with the Lord, come on in the room, that you have to have a unique experience with God that is unique to your own experience and nobody else's. That if I'm going to come to hear God call me, I can't hear God call me based on how he's called somebody else. I can't hear God call me based on how he calls everybody else. In other words, it is not the testimony of the majority that is going to help me to come to develop a relationship with God in the singular. That if I'm going to develop a relationship with God, that will be one that is sound and one that is necessary and essential in my life, then it's going to be predicated that I have my own experiences of God. It's going to be predicated that I have my own journeying with the Lord that can't be in alignment with what everybody else has done. This is what the text is trying to show us. That it's on the back road of life that Moses meets up with God on this road that is an unusual path. It is an unusual route that, watch this, is not overly crowded or populated. There's not a lot of people there. There's not a lot of traffic there. There's not a lot of noise there. Well, why, Brother Thomas, is that important? Because God knows if you're going to have a genuine relationship with him, it can't be predicated upon what everybody else is doing. Because sometimes when we're in crowded spaces, there's too much noise and too much distraction. And so I believe that God allowed Moses to travel the back road because God needed to get rid of the noise and need to eliminate the distractions. So that while you're traveling, you know, I can appreciate traveling the back roads. In my travelings, I can appreciate it because there are things along the scenic route that you see that you would not have seen had you gone the popular routes. That there are things that I remember fondly as me and my wife and our family would travel, that there are things and sightings that we see that we would have never seen had we gone the way that everybody else was going. But it was on these back roads and back routes that we got to see sights that were not common sights. Sights that when we saw them, all we couldn't do, we couldn't help but to see the hand of God in every single one of these sightings. And this is here what is happening in Moses' life. That God takes him on a back road, back route, backwood journey in order for Moses to see something that he ain't never seen before. Supernatural sights. You want to see the supernatural? Then maybe you have to go the back road. You want to see the hand of God move? Then maybe you need to be a little bit on the back road. Maybe you need to grow fond of these back road experiences. Where not everybody knows your story. Where not everybody knows what you've gone through and experienced. But these are the stories that are important because they are also the very things that led you to where you are in your relationship with God. Listen, I'm here reminded that sometimes we are called to celebrate a person's glory without knowing their story. Sometimes we are called to celebrate a person who makes it to the stage, but we don't know the private stories and details that happen that not many people know about or are told, because there are just some things about my experiences with God that sometimes are not important for you, but they are important for me. Here it is that I believe that that's what's happening. That we find here that there is something about the stories that people oftentimes will wonder, well, where was God in it? And how was God moving in it? For a person to be able to rise above challenges and overcome difficulties and get to the place where they stand directly in the center of their calling. What we do know is this, is that there is a story. And even though we don't know the details of the story, what we do know is what it inspired after that. Here it is. Come here for just a moment. All I'm trying to tell you is that there is nothing wrong with a back road experience. There is nothing wrong with not being on center stage. There's nothing wrong with not being in the limelight of everybody else. Because I believe that it's sometimes what happens in the back rooms and the back roads and the back routes of life that are most important and pivotal for us in our own lives. That there are a number of folk who had back road experiences. There are a number of folk who had back road experiences that produced or resulted in their coming into their glory or stories of prominence. I'll give you one or two. Joseph, I believe, had a back road experience. Who was sold by his brothers into slavery. It was a back road experience. Who was taken into slavery in Egypt. It was a back road experience. who came up in Potiphar's house, who had to be a servant in the house. But I believe God was in the details on the Backroad experience. Because all I know is this, is even though he came in the palace as a servant, he would leave as a prince. We don't know what happened in the Backroad, but what we do know is what happened as a result of the Backroad experience. Ruth had a Backroad experience. Ruth, y'all remember Ruth, the story of Ruth, the daughter of Naomi, who lost her husband and therefore lost access to all of her stuff. But here it is, she decided she was going to hang out with Naomi. Naomi tried to push her back and run her back to her mother's house. But she said, no, I won't leave you. I'll stay with you, and I'll go wherever you go, I'll go. And your people will be my people, and your God, my God. And boy, did she have a Backroad experience. Her and Naomi didn't know how life was going to turn out. Didn't know how things would result for them. But what we do find out is this, is she hung out on the back road. Somebody told me that she hung out on the back road of the fields of Boaz. They're picking ears of corn. And it was in this Backroad experience that we find out that she had an encounter with an unorthodox relationship with Boaz. And as a result of that, she comes from a place of being in a place of despair to a place of hope. What's my point? My point is that there are things that happen on the back roads of life that are pivotal so that we get to the place of purpose and calling.